Not too long ago, I filmed a video where I drew with Sharpies, and it was a real-time video, and I was exploring how Sharpies work and how I would use them in an illustration. And so I made a lot of mistakes, and I've been itching to tackle that project again. So here it is, I'm drawing with Sharpies again. Here is my current Sharpie collection. I've been a very good girl, and I have not fed this addiction in over 8 years. I have a lot of fine point Sharpies, I have a few ultra fine point Sharpies, and then I have like 4 of these stained by Sharpie pens, which are actually a brush pen, and they're very fluorescent, so they're fun to use with my normal Sharpies, even though they're made for fabric. Before diving in head first, I decided to take a couple extra precautions to kind of plan out the idea of this drawing, and I decided to do it digitally. So here I'm just thumbnailing some ideas, trying to find something that sparks my interest, and I finally landed on this third one right here. I really just enjoyed the hairstyle, I think. From here I start detailing the pose and making sure it's something that I want to pursue further when I move on to the traditional section of the drawing. And once I'm happy with that, I start adding in some colors. And I made sure that I swatched all of the Sharpies instead of using the cap colors, and then I tried to translate those into Photoshop and see how the colors are going to work well together. Like which colors look good next to each other, which ones don't, which ones have contrast and which ones don't. And from there I was able to come up with this illustration. And although it's a lot more detailed than a thumbnail necessarily needs to be, I kind of treated it as a thumbnail. So when I moved onto my piece of paper, here it is, and started sketching with a mechanical pencil, I didn't necessarily imitate the idea verbatim. My computer and where I draw are in 2 separate locations, so when I'm actually drawing, the computer is behind me, so I can't really look at it very easily while I'm sketching. So I'm doing it from memory, and so the elements that stood out most to me are the ones that I'm drawing, and the ones that like didn't seem as important are kind of getting left on the wayside. I think this kind of helps the idea actually further itself, because I'm not looking back at what I liked. I can only take forth what I liked or what I remember and input that into the new sketch. And it's kind of like a selection process. It's like throwing away some of the not as potent ideas and just holding on to those ones that I really, really liked. And for me, I think it was the heart-shaped umbrella, half updo in her hair, and that pinafore dress. Now these legs and the skirt, I feel like I had the most trouble with. I think it's because I was varying the most from my thumbnail sketch. So you'll see I'm playing around with the way the skirt is floating and blowing in the wind because I want it to be a very loose, sort of floaty sketch, whereas my thumbnail was kind of stiff and, you know, she was sat pretty firmly on something. Even though I didn't draw that something, she was still, you know, sitting on the invisible something. So when it came to sketching on the paper, I had to really think about it and basically go through that whole thumbnail process, but on the paper. I even at one point tried to draw her like walking through a puddle, but the legs were a little bit too short for how I had drawn the body, and I didn't really want to erase the whole thing, so I decided floaty was probably a better way to go. And boy am I glad that I did, because I love these legs. I like the way the knees are kind of together, and then the ankles kind of get further apart, and then the toes touch again. I don't know, I think this is really, really cute. It's not super stiff, it's flowy, and it has character to it, and I love that about it. And of course I was able to give her those rain boots because it's raining. It's not super obvious, but it's raining. At this point I realized there was some mechanical structure issues with the umbrella, so I had to shorten the length of the pole and draw like the little spider webs that come off from it, the mechanical bits. And I think this went a long way, just shortening that, because we're looking at the inside of the umbrella, so we're not gonna be able to see the top of the umbrella, and an umbrella, the handle is connected to the center of it, so I need to make sure I take that into consideration when I'm drawing it. And yeah, like I said, that just went a long way to making this look more like an umbrella, because umbrellas don't come in heart shapes. I think that would be very difficult to pull off, so any little help I can do to make it look more like an umbrella was definitely necessary. And now we finally move on to using the Sharpies. So the last time I used Sharpies, I think I outlined everything in black first, and then I learned that I really liked it when I used a contrasting color or a similar color to outline the colored sections instead. So here I am going in with that idea, outlining the hair with this dark pink, and then I'm going to fill it in with a lighter pink so that there's some contrast there. My favorite word. I did this because I wanted to be able to erase the pencil before I filled in the blunt of the hair color, because with Sharpies, when you go over pencil, it kind of just makes that pencil permanent and you can't erase it afterwards, and you can still kind of see it through the Sharpie because it's slightly transparent, and that's just kind of an ugly look. That's why I decided to tackle the illustration this way. I use this technique for not only the hair, but also the dress and her rain boots. Now for this character's skin is where I decided to try a different approach. I erased as much pencil as I could where I could still see like the basic outline shape of the legs. These two legs are like right on top of each other, so it was kind of important that we had that line, otherwise I was going to lose the shape of the leg. And so what I did is I outlined the whole thing with the thicker Sharpie. I think it's called a fine point Sharpie, but I always call it the thicker Sharpie. And then I colored it in, and I made sure I did quick, fast strokes to try and get a flat, even layer of color. I think it took 2 layers to get like it to look the way I wanted it to. And then I started noticing that some of the pencil was kind of like showing through the Sharpie, and once the Sharpie goes over it, it's permanent. So I erased it again and then colored in that second leg behind there. Here I'm trying to do more dense strokes to make it darker and give it a little bit more contrast between this leg and the leg that's closer to the viewer. But it just wasn't in your face enough, so I took this light pink color and colored in that whole back leg. First I tried just coloring in the bottom half underneath the knee, which looked kind of cute, but there wasn't enough contrast between the legs like I was mentioning earlier, so I colored in the entire thing, and I just love the way this looks. Like that pink and that peach, and the way they look right next to each other, and it looks like there's some shadow and some depth there. I'm very happy with the leg, and it makes me wish that I didn't line any of the drawing, because I just love that lineless look. So I put like the tan color, the pink layer, and then another tan layer on top, and it created that color that you see there. When coloring in the boots, I wanted them to look shiny, and since there's no white opaque Sharpie, actually I do own a white opaque Sharpie. Well, I didn't use it today. Instead, I just used the paper as my white, and I made sure that I left some open spaces inside of the boot that would give it that shiny, exaggeratedly bright shimmer on the boots. It makes it look reflective. That is the word. Then I moved on to coloring the dress, and I found this really wonderful denim color. I wish Sharpies had color names on them. I could tell you what it was, but it looks like this. There's all the information I have for you. And again, I'm trying to make sure I fill in sections quickly to avoid streaks. And it worked pretty well for the most part. If there ever were noticeable streaks, I would try and do another layer over top, and that usually took care of that problem. And if that's still too streaky for you, you can always add a texture on top. That's not why I added this texture, I just thought it would be fun. But I used the ultra fine blue Sharpie and just added diagonal stripes all over the dress. With the straps, I gave it almost like a chevron pattern of stripes, and then I made sure that that stripe continued into the skirt and tried to take the wrinkles into consideration. Even though I'd fallen in love with that lineless look that I did on the legs, her shirt's gonna be white, so I had to outline it with something. Well, I guess I didn't have to, but I did. And I decided to outline it with this blue because it was going to be a blue striped shirt, and I thought that would work really well. I love adding stripes to like shirts that are too big for the shoulders, because you have to like think about how that stripe is going to react with that shoulder and fold over it, and then once it becomes a sleeve, the angle's going to change, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed that. That's just something I think about and brings me happiness for some reason. When it came to doing the face, I wanted to try and avoid using a black Sharpie as much as possible, so I decided to use that dark blue that I had used lower in the illustration for her eyelashes and her lips as well. I think this was a good idea, not only because I was following the challenge I had set for myself, but also because it added like some cohesion between all the colors in the illustration. And then instead of filling in the eye color with the eyelash color like I usually do, I decided to use a lighter blue, but it looks very similar to the blue I used for the eyelashes, so I'll have to try harder next time. I tried to avoid line art where I didn't need it, so that's why the cheek and the ear don't have the pink line art around her face. And now when I'm adding in the color of her skin, I'm taking in where that chin would be into consideration when I color it, and that gives it that like paper cutout look that I really like. I tried to add some structure to the face by layering the same marker over itself for the skin, so like to try and add color to the cheeks and the nose, and it worked really well, but it was very subtle and I wanted something with a little more oomph. So I grabbed the lightest pink I could find and layered that over on top of the nose, and I really liked that. So after coloring in the lips, I started adding some more dimension around the eyes, because usually there's some color there, and then also on the cheeks and the ear, and I really like the way the face turned out with that. And then I also used this pink again to add even more shading to that bottom leg, exaggerating it as much as I can. Then I went in and started coloring in the hair. Again, I'm trying to keep in mind where the shine would be on the hair to give the hair just a little bit of that shimmer that I like. And you really have to think about it when you're coloring because these markers don't erase. I found you can always take away highlights, but you can't add more for the most part. So do big swooping highlights if you need to and if you're nervous, and then slowly chisel away at those to make them look the way you want. Now for this further section of hair, I realized if I used a darker color, perhaps even the same color that I used for the line art of the hair, I could give it that paper cutout look that I wanted. I first layered on the pink bubblegum color that I used for the rest of the hair, and then over top of that, I put a darker color, and that just made it look like one flat shape, and that was exactly what I was looking for. If I had an ultrafine marker in the same shade that I was using for the skin, this would have been easier because then I could have erased more, but here I am doing the arm, trying to get that flat look. I even had to redraw the hand because that one was not going anywhere. And I was very nervous about picking up the graphite with the Sharpie and getting those ugly gray blobs. So I erased it as light as I could and then filled in like the tiny little shapes of the hand without letting it touch any of the graphite. Even though it was mostly erased, I didn't want to even take a chance. And then once the innards were all colored, I was able to erase it and then go in and add some more details and even like shade some of the fingers to make them look even further away. For the other hand, I decided to take the easy route and I outlined some of the fingers with that magenta color and then just colored in the skin section. That way I didn't have to worry about the graphite and I still had something that looked remotely like a hand, you know? Now, for the umbrella, I wanted to try going at it without any lines, so I just picked out the colors that I would need and erased as much of that umbrella shape as I could. Now, remembering how I had colored in the thumbnail over on my computer, I remembered where I wanted like the shines to be, and the shines on the umbrella were going to be in this pink color, have a little bit of a hue shift there, and then the base of the umbrella, or the base color of the umbrella, was going to be that purple color. So because I knew this in my head, I was able to kind of just do this as I went, because I had already made these decisions previously. That is what thumbnails are for. I really need to prep my work more than I do. I feel like I usually just sit down and draw something and I tell you what I do, but I'd like to do some more pre-planning in my art in the future. It's really helpful. There's a reason, you know, professionals do it. I used an ultra fine Sharpie for all of the mechanical bits of the umbrella, and then once those were done I was able to fill in those sections with the purple. And when you have smaller sections to fill in, it's a lot easier to get a flat color without having to worry about streaks. So those are really good in diversifying the large umbrella shape into smaller sections. And then to add some more depth to the umbrella and make it look further in the distance, like behind the character, I used one of those stained by Sharpie brush marker things. And I used the purple one, which is the only not fluorescent one. So that worked perfectly. And I just shaded behind the character. I decided to shade in sections because the umbrella is those funky shapes. And the light's gonna be hitting each angle differently. And I thought this was the best way to approach that. And then it looked a little bit like this. I feel like it looks a little bit like a gem. Do you agree? I don't know if it looks anything like an umbrella, but it looks cool. And I can't ask for more than that. And then here's where I start going a little crazy and I add a bunch of raindrops hitting the umbrella, but only the umbrella. Weirdly suspicious. And I also tried to add heart-shaped puddles underneath her. Don't think that worked, but I tried. And I'm gonna make a little bit of a confession here. My self-esteem was a little bit through the roof because the art was turning out exactly the way I wanted it to. Isn't necessarily a good thing. Because then I was like, hey, I can draw a background. Look how good I draw. I can draw a background. Oh my gosh. Whenever I feel confident in myself, that's when the art takes a turn for the worst. Ugh, don't let me do that. Ugh. Luckily it doesn't happen that often, so. Oh, and it does. I feel guilty for feeling good, and then I make poopy art, so trust me, I get my just desserts. Anyway, I decided to add color to the background. I wish I had just chosen one color and it could have been like a monotone background. I feel like that would have contrasted well with the character in the front, but I didn't do that. Decided to use colors. Tried to go over them with pink to try and create that monotone look in post, but they were competing with the character in a way that I didn't really like. So it's kind of like a last-ditch effort to save the background. I grabbed my white Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay India ink. This ink is like a little slightly opaque, so I thought it would be perfect to lay over top of this and just lighten it up a bit, make it less overbearing. And it did work, but I think it smudged some of the Sharpie because it created like almost a pink tone, and then I had to like figure out what to do with the edge of this pink. I tried to blend it out as much as possible, but it wasn't really working, so I decided to make it look like fog, which actually looks really kind of cool. That's one of those happy accident things, but I still would have liked it better if it didn't have a background at all. And after that dried, I went in and added in the tattoo. I did a lot better job of drawing this tattoo in the digital version. I think it was the angle that threw me off, but I played around with it and got to look semi-decent. It's supposed to be like a sun on the kneecap, then there's like a cloud underneath the sun, and then underneath that cloud it becomes rain. Just look at the digital version, it makes me feel better. That's what it was supposed to look like. Then I went in with my Sakura Decoress white gel pen and added in some highlights here and there that I missed when coloring it in. And I also colored in the tattoo because I thought that would help. But yeah, here's my finished illustration. I really like the way Sharpies look next to each other. If you can find ones that like contrast with the ones around it, you can make some really fun pops of color illustrations, and I love that sort of like flat look. There's still streaks in them, but it's like a fun streak. It looks like Sharpie, you know? And as a kid, Sharpies are like that art supply that you have access to that are also like really cool and feel like an adult art supply. And the fact that I can make art with these, I don't know, I feel like I'm just making 8-year-old me so proud. I had so much fun. Like, I say that at the end of every video, but I love doing art and I have fun making it, so I'm not being redundant. It's a new fun each and every time. Anyway, I want to thank you for watching today's video. Do you use Sharpie for your art? If you do you have like a specific pack of Sharpies that you like the best? I noticed there's like so many different kinds now with all these different colors, and I wonder how different they actually are. So I'm wondering what your opinion is on that. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys all next week, and I hope you have a delicious evening full of waffles. Bye!